She's just not on our level. That's what my sister said, while opening a $2,000 gift under a tree I paid for. No one corrected her. Not my mother, not my father, not even the man about to marry into the family. I just sat there, empty-handed, like I was the only one in the room who didn't belong. And for a moment, I almost believed it. But they were wrong. I wasn't beneath them. I was the reason they hadn't lost everything. And the moment I stopped protecting them, everything they called normal started to collapse. But that didn't happen overnight. It started long before that Christmas, back when I made the biggest mistake of my life. I thought silence would earn me a place in their family. I'm 32, and on Christmas morning, I finally understood exactly where I stood in my own family. The house smelled like cinnamon candles and fresh coffee. Perfect, the kind of scene people post online to prove everything's fine. My father stood by the tree, handing out gifts like it was a ceremony. My mother smiled over a gold bracelet. My sister laughed before opening hers. She already knew it would be expensive. Even her fiancé got a custom leather watch case, his initials stamped clean across the top. And me, I sat on the couch, holding a mug that had gone cold, waiting to hear my name. I told myself it had to be a mistake. Maybe something was left in the hallway. Maybe a box was tucked behind the tree. So I waited, through every ribbon, every piece of paper hitting the floor, every laugh, every thank you. My name never came. After a while, the silence around me got louder than the room. So I did the only thing you do when you're trying to hold on to your dignity. I asked, calmly, if something had been missed. My mother didn't hesitate. She looked at me like a stain on a white carpet. Why waste money on you? She said it like it was obvious. Like it didn't need explaining. Then, almost casually, we only keep you around out of habit. My sister tilted her head, studying me. You're just not on our level. And my father, he didn't correct them, didn't even look at me, just adjusted his sleeve and told everyone to keep opening gifts before breakfast got cold. That was the moment something shifted. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just clear. Because it didn't hurt the way it used to. It clarified things. For years, I told myself they didn't mean it. That they didn't understand me. That if I worked harder, showed up more, proved my worth, something would change. But sitting there, empty-handed, watching them celebrate each other like I wasn't even in the room, I saw it. This wasn't a mistake. It was intentional. They hadn't forgotten me. They had decided I didn't matter. And the truth is, for a long time, I let them believe that. I let them think I was the one who didn't measure up. The quiet daughter. The one with the paperwork job. The one who didn't marry into money or build a life that looked good in photos. It was easier that way. Easier to sit at the edge of the table, to be talked over, to be underestimated. Because when people underestimate you, they stop asking questions. What my family never understood, never even tried to understand, was what I actually did. They reduced it to something small, forgettable. My mother called it that little office thing. My sister joked I moved numbers around all day. But what I do is simple. I fix things when they're already broken. Commercial acquisitions, distressed assets, businesses that look polished on the outside, but are bleeding underneath. I step in when banks are about to walk away, when contracts unravel, when numbers stop making sense. I don't deal in appearances. I deal in reality, in debt, in leverage, in who really owns what, when everything is finally put on paper. 6 years ago, my father's business was already falling apart. He just didn't know it. From the outside, Bennett and Company interiors looked perfect. Custom sofas, imported lighting, showrooms that felt like magazine spreads. My father built his reputation on that illusion. Old school values, family legacy, refined taste. That's what he told people. Behind the scenes, the numbers told a different story. Vendor payments late, the landlord pushing back. Financing tightening in ways he didn't understand or didn't want to. He made decisions the way he always had. Confident. Publish. Without reading the fine print. That's where I came in. Not because anyone asked. Not because they trusted me, because I could see how close everything was to collapsing. And back then, I wasn't ready to watch it happen. I had just closed a deal in Greenwich. Long, complicated, the kind that pays well because most people don't have the patience to finish it. Most people would have celebrated, upgraded their life. I didn't. I used that money to stabilize theirs. Quietly, I formed a holding company and bought the building their flagship showroom sat in, cleared the overdue property taxes, negotiated down vendor exposure that would have crushed them within months. And when their bank hesitated on renewing the inventory line, I stepped in, personally guaranteed it. That wasn't a favor. That was risk. The kind that follows you home at night. The kind that can take everything if it goes wrong. And I signed my name anyway. My father told people he pulled off a miracle turnaround. My mother called it a blessing. My sister posted photos like everything had just worked itself out. No one asked how. No one asked who. They didn't know the building was mine. They didn't understand what a personal guarantee meant. They didn't realize that every December, when the lights were on and the store was full and everything looked stable, that stability was being held together by decisions I made, contracts I signed, risks I carried. And I let them believe whatever they wanted because part of me thought, if I held things together long enough, if I showed up without asking for credit, maybe one day they'd see me differently. Not as the extra chair, not as the afterthought. You see, but as someone who belonged. They didn't. They got comfortable relying on something they didn't understand, comfortable benefiting from someone they didn't respect, comfortable building their sense of superiority on my silence. For 6 years, they paid almost nothing to occupy a building they didn't own. 6 years ignoring every quiet hint I made about structure. 6 years treating me like I was lucky just to be in the room. And every holiday, every dinner, every gathering, it followed the same pattern. Seated last, spoken over, corrected mid-sentence, laughed at like I was some harmless mistake that never got fixed. Christmas morning wasn't new. It was just the first time they stopped pretending. Sitting there, empty-handed, with everything in my name, I finally saw it. They didn't disrespect me because I had no value. They did it because admitting my value would have forced them to face how much they depended on me. And people like that will protect their version of reality, even if it means diminishing the person keeping them afloat. Once I saw that clearly, something in me settled. I didn't cry when I left the house that morning. No slammed doors, no raised voices, just a quiet exit, the kind that doesn't ask to be noticed. I drove back to my condo, 20 minutes across town, parked in my usual spot, and sat there with the engine off, hands resting on the wheel. And for the first time in years, I felt calm, not because nothing had happened, because everything finally made sense. I went upstairs, took off my coat, and made tea. Not coffee. Tea. Slower, deliberate. I stood there, watching the steam rise, and thought, this is the last day I pretend this is normal? Then I sat down and started writing. Line by line, I documented everything I had covered for them over 6 years. Property taxes, insurance premiums, emergency repairs, vendor settlements. The inventory line I personally guaranteed when their bank was ready to walk away. Numbers, dates, signatures, facts that didn't care about anyone's feelings. By the time I finished, it wasn't a list. It was a record of how much of their stability had been built on something they refused to see. Then I pulled the documents that mattered most. The deed, loan agreements, the trademark my grandmother had quietly transferred to me. When she realized my father couldn't protect it, I laid everything out on the table, neat, precise. For years, I kept things flexible, informal. Family, that was my mistake. Because in their world, family meant no accountability. So I picked up my phone and called my attorney, not the family attorney, mine. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't ask what would keep the peace. I asked what would make it clean, what would make it final. So, by Monday morning, I had my answer. My attorney didn't waste time. She read everything, asked a few precise questions, then turned years of silence into something enforceable. Effective immediately. My personal guarantee was withdrawn. Effective immediately. Their showroom occupancy would terminate in 30 days. Effective immediately. Any use of the Bennett & Company name without my approval would trigger legal action. No anger, no emotion. Just structure, deadlines, consequences. Clean. I asked her to package it in a white gift box. She paused, then laughed quietly. You're serious. I was. If they wanted Christmas to be a performance, I could speak their language. On January 2nd at 8:30 a.m., the package was delivered to the showroom. I didn't go. I didn't need to. I could see it. Glass doors, polished floors, everything controlled. On the surface. My sister would have brought it in. She handled appearances. She would have assumed it was a late holiday gift. Something expensive. Something expected. She would have opened it. Ursas, without hesitation. Yershor EB. Yasa YCD. And then silence. I didn't hear the scream, but I knew it came. The moment confusion turned into panic. The moment words stopped being abstract and became real. By 8:45, my phone lit up. Olivia first. I let it ring. Then my mother. Then my father. Back to Olivia. 3 calls. 6. 9. Each one more urgent than the last. The same people who couldn't spare a moment for me a week earlier now couldn't stop calling. At 9:05, my attorney confirmed delivery. Signed. On time. A voicemail came through. My father's voice, tight. Claire, pick up. There has to be some misunderstanding. Another one, sharper. This is outrageous. Call me now. My mother, colder. You are not doing this over Christmas. And Olivia. No laughter now. No confidence. If this is some kind of stunt, it's not funny. We have clients here. Dad is freaking out. Call me back. I didn't. I listened once. Saved them. Iwarditoms. Forwarded them. For the first time in years, I wasn't reacting. I was documenting. Around noon, my father texted. Said the building couldn't be mine. Said he built everything. Said there had to be a mistake. I stared at the screen, then typed 5 words. Read the documents more carefully. Then I blocked his number, because this wasn't confusion. It was the first time they were being forced to see what had always been there, and realizing they never bothered to look. It was recognition, just 6 years late. They showed up the next day, not one at a time, not with space to think. All of them standing outside my condo like urgency could replace accountability. I hadn't invited them. They hadn't asked. That was always their way. Rules were for other people. I opened the door, and there they were. My father in an overcoat he hadn't buttoned properly, like he'd dressed in a rush. My mother wearing that polished smile she used right before saying something sharp. Olivia, arms crossed, jaw tight. And Daniel, standing just behind them, looking like a man realizing the story he'd been told didn't quite hold. My father started talking before I said anything. Claire, that's enough. Whatever this is, we're going to sit down and resolve it like adults. I leaned against the doorframe, looked at him for a second. Which adults? I asked. The ones who give gifts to everyone except one daughter and call it normal? My mother stepped in, voice soft, edged. You're taking this too far. This is a misunderstanding, and you're turning it into a business attack. I held her gaze. What part was misunderstood? I asked. The part where you said you only keep me around out of habit? Olivia exhaled sharply, rolling her eyes. Here we go. You're doing that thing again. Taking everything literally. It was a joke. Christmas got tense. You're always so sensitive. Sensitive. That word again. Families like mine love that word. It shifts the problem away from what was said onto how you reacted. I stepped aside. Just enough. Not because I wanted them in. Because I was done having conversations on their terms. They walked into my living room like they owned it. My father pacing, my mother scanning the space. Olivia near the window, arms still crossed. Daniel quiet, watching everything. The documents, my father said, turning back, are aggressive, completely unnecessary. We can fix this privately. There's nothing to fix, I said. The terms are clear. If you want to discuss anything, do it through counsel. Something in his expression cracked. Just for a second. The controlled version of him slipped, and I saw the man underneath, the one who needed me to be smaller. You wouldn't have any of this without me, he said, voice lower now. I nodded once. Maybe not, but you wouldn't still be in that building without me. Sir. That landed. I saw it in Olivia shifting, in Daniel finally looking at her instead of the floor. My mother moved quickly. She always did. Her eyes filled with tears, a little too fast. Do you know what you're doing to this family? People are talking. Clients will hear. Your grandmother would be ashamed. I almost smiled. Would she? I asked quietly. Or would she be ashamed of Christmas morning? She didn't answer. Olivia did. This isn't about Christmas, she snapped. This is about you being jealous. You've never been the face of anything, not the business, not this family. There it was. Not money, not fairness, status. Everything for them was how it looked. I tilted my head. Oh, do you know whose guarantee kept your inventory line open this quarter? She blinked. Dad handles the finances. I looked at him. Did you tell her the bank's already been notified? Silence, the kind that stretches, just long enough to hurt. Daniel spoke then, careful. Wait, what bank? No one answered him. My father stepped closer, lowering his voice like distance could bring control back. This doesn't need to escalate. If you stop acting irrational, we can resolve this quietly. I held his gaze. If I'm so irrational, I said, so unimportant, so beneath all of you, I let it sit. Why did every one of you come running the second I stopped protecting you? No one spoke. Not my father, not my mother, not Olivia, because there wasn't an answer. That didn't break everything they had been pretending was true. My mother tried again, blaming my job, my independence, the city I lived in. Olivia said I was using money as a weapon. My father warned me I was making a mistake I couldn't take back. I listened, and for the first time, none of it landed. Because once you see the structure clearly, who depends on who? Who holds the risk? Who signs the paper? The noise stops mattering. By the time they left, my mother's composure had cracked into frustration. My father was holding onto dignity through panic. Olivia was already arguing with Daniel in the hallway. And I stood there, in the quiet after they were gone, feeling something I hadn't felt around them in years. Not anger, not hurt. Clarity. They spent years convincing me I didn't belong at their level. And now, for the first time, they were being forced to see the ground they stood on was never theirs. And when that illusion started to crack, they did what people like them always do. They didn't reflect. They escalated. At first it was subtle. My mother started calling relatives, framing me as unstable. Not angry, not hurt. Unstable, a useful word when you want to discredit someone without addressing what they're saying. My father reached out to vendors, said I was overreacting, that I was trying to pressure him over a family issues. Olivia took it online, posting carefully worded quotes about betrayal, narcissism, ungrateful daughters, never naming me, but making sure people could connect it. It was coordinated. If they couldn't control the facts, they would control the story. But stories only go so far. When contracts are involved, about a week later, my attorney called. Her voice was steady, but sharper underneath. They sent something over, she said. You need to see this. I was at my desk when I opened it. Sunlight coming through the window. Everything quiet. Ordinary. At first, it looked like paperwork, formal language, structured arguments. Then I started reading. They were claiming the building had always been a family asset, that my holding company existed for tax convenience, that Bennett and Company had developed rights through years of use. Aggressive. Creative? Completely false. But that wasn't what hit me. Inspiredness. It was what they attached. Board meeting minutes. From a meeting that never happened. An internal memo I had never seen. And a signature. Mine. Close enough to pass at a glance. Close enough that someone who didn't know me or didn't care to look would accept it. I didn't move. Just sat there for a few seconds. Then I picked up my phone and called my attorney. They forged, she said. Before I even finished. 2 words. Clear, final, cold. And I leaned back in my chair, staring at the documents across my desk. For a long time, I gave them the benefit of the doubt. Even after Christmas, even after the confrontation, some part of me still believed. There were lines they wouldn't cross. That belief ended right there. Because this wasn't denial. This was deliberate, calculated, reckless. In a way that told me they still didn't understand who they were dealing with. They thought this was emotional, personal, something I'd back away from once it got uncomfortable. What they forgot, this is what I do. People lie on paper all the time. They rewrite timelines, backdate decisions, reconstruct reality to protect themselves. And eventually, someone like me gets called in to take it apart. Now, I was on the other side, and I knew exactly where to start. I pulled every record I had, email chains, version histories, metadata, wire transfers, insurance documents, the original transfer from my grandmother, everything that built a timeline. Not just ownership, intent, because that's where forged documents fail. Not in what they say. In when they say it. My attorney moved fast. A formal demand to preserve records. A response outlining the flaws. Then filings. Clean. Precise. Unavoidable. Confirmation of title. Control. Trademark rights. Once the bank was notified that my guarantee was gone and ownership was disputed, they did what banks always do. They protected themselves. Credit tightened. Inventory shipments paused. Conversations shifted. And just like that, the polished surface my family spent years maintaining started to crack. Not because I attacked it, because they forced the truth into the open. The moment they forged my name, my signature, my authority, this stopped being family. It became something else. Something they couldn't talk their way out of. Something that had to be proven. In detail. In public. Under light. They didn't control. That's where everything came apart. The hearing wasn't dramatic. No shouting. No last-minute confessions. No one slamming fists. It was quieter than that. Controlled. Clinical. The kind of room where truth doesn't need volume. Just evidence. I arrived early. 10 minutes. Sat beside my attorney. Everything laid out the way I like it. Clean. Labeled. Chronological. Across the room, my father stood in a tailored gray suit, the kind he wore when he believed authority alone would carry him through. My mother sat beside him, posture perfect, expression tight. Olivia looked tired, angry, but tired. And their attorney, he looked different than the first time I saw him. Less certain, like he had finally read everything. That told me more than anything else. When it started, there was no spectacle. Just questions. Precise. Directed. Unavoidable. My side was simple. Title history. The transfer of the building into my holding company. Financial records showing exactly when and how I stepped in during the crisis. The personal guarantee I signed and withdrew. The trademark chain tied back to my grandmother. No interpretation. Just facts. Then came their side. At first, it sounded polished. Family intent. Informal agreements, shared understanding, the kind of language that works in stories, not under scrutiny, because eventually, the judge asked the only question that mattered. Do you have documentation to support that? That's where it started to break. They presented the board minutes. My attorney didn't raise her voice, didn't get emotional. She asked for the metadata, and the room changed. Creation date, 3 days after Christmas. Edited twice. Source, Olivia's laptop. There's a particular kind of silence when a lie stops breathing. You feel it before anyone speaks. Their attorney tried to recover, said it was a draft, misfiled, an internal mistake. My attorney asked one question. Why does the draft contain a simulated signature from my client? No answer. My father was next. Direct. No room to move. Have you paid commercial rent consistent with your claim of ownership? He started talking about family, informal structures, trust. The judge cut him off. I'm asking for numbers, dates, amounts. He didn't have them. Because numbers don't bend like stories do. Olivia was asked about how she represented the business publicly, whether she presented it as family-owned, without clarifying the legal structure. She said, everyone knew what I meant. The judge paused. That's not an answer. And just like that, the performance they had built for years lost its footing. The image, the story, the confidence, none of it mattered in that room. Only what could be proven, only what could be traced, only what could survive when someone looked closely. By the time the order came down, it wasn't surprising. It was inevitable. Title confirmed in my holding company, my right to terminate occupancy upheld. Immediate restriction on their use of the Bennett & Company Interiors name, and a formal note on the record about the questionable documents, left open for further action if I chose to pursue it. It wasn't loud. It wasn't emotional. But it was absolute. We walked out into the hallway, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, everything feeling almost too ordinary for what had just happened. My father caught up to me before I reached the elevator. Claire, he said, voice lower now, controlled again, like he was trying to put the mask back on. You've made your point. Are you really going to follow through with this? I looked at him, and for a moment, I didn't see my father. I saw the man who watched me sit empty-handed on Christmas morning, and decided that was acceptable. Yes, I said. Olivia stepped forward, anger sharp. So what? Destroying the business makes you feel important. I shook my head. No, I said. Being treated like I existed would have been enough. Then I pressed the elevator button, because for the first time, the truth wasn't something I had to carry. Quietly, it had been seen, recorded, confirmed. Shh. That was the part they didn't prepare for. Because once something is confirmed, legally, publicly, it stops being a family disagreement. It becomes reality. And reality doesn't care about pride, or reputation, or how things used to look. The first cracks showed up within a week. Not dramatic, just hesitation. A vendor who used to offer flexible terms suddenly asked for deposits up front. Another delayed a shipment. Internal review. Calls that used to come back in hours took days, then didn't come at all. That's how it starts. Not collapse. Shift. Once the bank fully understood, my guarantee was gone. And ownership wasn't what they assumed. They did what banks always do. They protected themselves. No expansion. No flexibility. No benefit of the doubt. 2 major inventory shipments for January, quietly put on hold. No inventory. No sales. No sales. No illusion. I didn't need to be there to see it. I knew the pattern. I'd seen it before. Businesses that look polished on the outside, unraveling underneath the moment support disappears. But this time, it was personal. A local design blog picked it up first. Nothing direct. Just a careful piece about operational uncertainty around Bennett & Company. Enough to raise questions. Enough to make clients hesitate. And in that world, hesitation spreads faster than confidence. Daniel called me 10 days after the hearing. No anger, no accusation, just quiet. I don't need details, he said. I just need to know, did Olivia know? I paused. She knew what she was told, I said. But the truth? No. There was silence. Then, thank you. He hung up. 2 days later, their engagement photos disappeared. Another fracture. Inside the business, it got worse. Staff started asking questions. Questions my father couldn't answer. Without unraveling everything. 2 senior employees resigned the same week. Quiet. Yes, professional. Final. My mother stopped posting. The charity events. The gallery photos. That carefully curated life built on taste and stability went quiet. Because image only works when something real is holding it up. And that foundation, where was gone. My father tried to hold it together. I'll give him that. He showed up every day, stayed in the showroom, tried to keep things looking normal. But normal needs consistency. It needs trust. And once those are broken, what's left is performance. Without an audience, non just socially adi. As the 30-day deadline got closer, the tone changed. Less anger, more urgency. Requests turned into negotiations. Negotiations into quiet pleas. Not directly to me. They had learned that didn't work, so they went through intermediaries. Carefully worded messages, trying to make it sound temporary, manageable, fixable. It wasn't. Because what they lost wasn't just access to a building, it was credibility. And once that's gone, no amount of staging brings it back. I didn't feel satisfaction watching it. I felt recognition. For the first time, they were living what I had lived for years. That feeling, when the ground under you isn't as solid as you thought. The difference was, when it happened to me, I adapted. When it happened to them, there was nothing left to stand on. And when the deadline came, I didn't go alone. I brought my attorney, a locksmith, and a clipboard. Every step documented. It took less than 2 hours. No shouting, no confrontation. Just process. Locks changed, excess revoked, inventory logged. The showroom, once the center of their world, reduced to assets. Liabilities. Loose ends. It wasn't destroyed. That would have been easier. It was worse. Small damage. Deliberate. Missing tags. Bent fixtures. Scratched surfaces. Nothing obvious, but enough to slow everything down. To cost more. Petty. Predictable. Ihan is so napkin tiny. On the main display table, where Olivia used to film, there was a white box. Waiting. I knew what it was before I opened it. Inside, a blank Christmas tag. No name. No message. Just absence. The same one they gave me. Under it, a note. Her handwriting. Some things never change. I held it longer than I expected. Not because it hurt, because it confirmed something. Even after everything, the hearing, the fallout, the collapse, they still needed that version of the story. Where I was the problem, where nothing they did required reflection, where I still didn't belong. I slipped the tag into my coat pocket, not as a wound, as a reminder. 4 months later, I sold the building, a hospitality group out of Atlanta. Clean offer, above market, no complications, fast close, the kind of deal I respect, built on clarity, not illusion. And I didn't keep the Bennett and Company name alive for them. I retired it. I licensed a few of my grandmother's original design archives, where they actually belonged, handled with care, with context, and I let the rest go. Because some things aren't meant to be saved. They're meant to end. That spring, I started something new, smaller, sharper, focused. A firm built around the work I'd been doing quietly for years, helping people navigate situations exactly like the one my family created. Businesses tangled in ego, in assumptions, in agreements no one puts on paper until it's too late. Turns out, there's no shortage of that, and I was very good at it. In my office, there's a simple black frame on the wall. Inside it, the blank gift tag. Clients ask about it sometimes. I tell them it's a reminder, not of what I lost, of what I stopped accepting. That's the part people don't understand. They think this was about money. Control. Getting even. It wasn't. It was about clarity. For a long time, I believed what a lot of people are taught. That family means you stay, no matter what. That you tolerate things you'd never accept from anyone else. That loyalty is measured by how much you endure in silence. But silence isn't loyalty, it's permission. And when you give people permission long enough, they stop asking if they deserve it. They just take. I didn't leave because of one Christmas morning. That moment just removed the last excuse. It forced me to see the pattern clearly, not as misunderstandings, but as a structure, one where I was useful enough to rely on and invisible enough to dismiss. That's not family. That's convenience. People ask if I feel guilty. I don't. I felt grief. I felt anger. I felt the kind of exhaustion that comes from carrying something that was never yours to carry alone. But guilt? No. Because I didn't destroy anything. I stopped funding it. I stopped reinforcing a version of reality. That only worked as long as I stayed quiet and kept giving. And once I stepped out of that role, everything else followed. That's the truth people don't want to face, especially the ones who benefit from your silence. Respect isn't something you earn by making yourself smaller, and belonging isn't something you prove by staying where you're not valued. Sometimes, the most honest thing you can do is leave. There comes a point in life when clarity matters more than comfort. We're taught to endure, to stay quiet, to hold everything together. But over time, silence becomes permission. Permission for others to overlook your value, to take what you give and call it normal. Real strength isn't how much you tolerate. It's knowing when respect is gone. Boundaries aren't betrayal. They're self-respect. You don't owe anyone access to your time, your energy, your resources, if they refuse to see your worth. And sometimes, the most necessary decision you can make is to choose yourself.